Hi, Joe.
And now we're live. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It's very fortuitous. Your timing comes right in the middle of this big hubbub about this Native American elder and this young boy with one of those stupid fucking red hats on.
Yep.
Would you have ever imagined that a slogan like "Make America Great Again" would be so divisive? As somehow or another, like that would be like, "Make America Great Again." Well, sounds like they just want to make things great, like all positive. No. And a red hat with white letters. Has there ever been a time like that where an object like a red hat with white letters was so repulsive to half the country?
Yes. Well, I mean, some people see it as the equivalent of a white hood.
Wow. I don't know about that.
They do. No,
I believe they do.
They do. They believe that wearing it, that a 16-year-old wearing that hat sort of carries intense moral weight. That surely we know that a 16-year-old is not aware of all of the implications of wearing that hat.
Well, yeah, but the problem with that is Kanye wears it.
Right. Fair enough.
It doesn't really work.
I agree. I'm just saying there are people who really make that argument.
I get it. I know they do.
And people who are paid for their opinions.
Well, yeah. Well, there's also people that are calling for this child's name and address. They're calling to dox him and publicly expose him. This is a child. He's 16. Is that what he is? He's
16 years old. And one of the things that was just so amazing about the whole brouhaha around, I mean, it was in a way like this perfect encapsulation of our outrage culture, right? Because people saw a tiny clip of this video and it was like a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
You saw in it this morality play of what it looked to be was a group of mostly white kids from Coventry Catholic School. I think it's in Kentucky. And it looked like, at first glance, that they were smirking and smug and had these sort of shit-eating grins on their faces and that they were surrounding this older Native American man. And I have to tell you, I had a visceral reaction to it. The second I saw it, like so many other people, I was like, this is, where we are in our broken culture, and they're bullying this guy, and here's the rise of I had all of those reactions. The challenge of what it means to be a journalist is to not see people as signifiers or as stand-ins just based on their identity. And that's what like 95% of the press corps did. They sort of leaped to assume that, our visceral reaction was accurate, when in fact, when you actually looked at like the 2-hour video of the whole interaction, which also included this group of Black Israelites or Hebrew Israelites, they called themselves, it was not that at all. The Native American man had walked up to this group. The 4 other guys had been heckling the group beforehand, calling them crackers, calling them Satan, calling the one black kid in the group things that can't even be said. So it was just far more complicated. And what was really, really disheartening is that the initial outrage was enough for the mainstream press to report on it. Like Twitter has kind of become almost an assigning editor for places like the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. And then when the actual truth of the thing comes out, when we move past the outrage cycle, they have to sort of write the follow-up story to the fake outrage to begin with.
Defending the fake outrage instead of backing up and saying, we made a mistake.
Right. Some people said that they made a mistake.
That's wonderful. That's a good sign.
Yes.
It really is.
But one of the things that was so horrifying was that people that are supposed to be adults, people with blue check marks on Twitter, were saying things like, this is the face of white patriarchy, this 16-year-old kid.
Or what Reza Aslan said.
Yeah, or Reza Aslan said, have you ever seen a more punchable face? Kathy Griffin was saying, I need names, shame him, dox him. How do these people not understand the implications of that? So what happened over the weekend was that the, sleuthy detectives on Twitter found a kid who they thought was the kid in the video, wasn't actually the kid. So there's the actual kid who was doxxed, the family was harassed, everything that we now know happens in these outrage cycles. But then there was another kid who looked suspiciously like him, who was not him at all, whose family, there was an amazing and heartbreaking Twitter thread about it, whose family was in the middle of a family wedding. And they had to spend their whole weekend fighting off these mobs who were trying to destroy them. And it wasn't even the kid in the video. I mean, that is really horrifying to me. that that's where we are. And the fact that adults who should know better are fomenting this and don't see how thin, like it sounds heavy, but like the veneer of civilization is. Like they're taking a pickaxe to it. It's just, I just found the whole thing to be terrifying. I don't know how you felt.
I felt exactly the same way. And I think it's a very unique moment because it's so public and it's so prevalent in whether it's Twitter or Facebook, it's everywhere. And it sort of embodies everything that's wrong with a lack of nuance and with people taking one side versus the other and sticking with it, with not confronting their own personal biases, with looking at these things through the eyes of this is the enemy, I'm on the good side, they're on the bad side,
yes.
Let's get them. And also this distorted idea of what it takes to be violent. Like this idea of this is a punchable person, like calling for violence. You're hearing a lot of this. Like this is one of the things that troubles me so much about the left. My parents were hippies. You know, I grew up when I was a little kid. We lived from the age of 7 to 11 in San Francisco during the Vietnam War. While the Vietnam War was ending, I was living in the middle of the hippie world. I always felt that people on the left were like these well-read, kind, compassionate people. But somewhere along the line, within the last few years, people on the left are calling for violence. This is very confusing to me. And it's this frivolous social media call for violence. It's not an in-person, be there, boots on the ground call for violence. It's a very strange call for violence. Punch Nazis. I'm hearing this all the time.
Because it's...
Right.
Because it's... Sorry, go ahead.
What I'm going to say is, what is a Nazi? Okay, so if you mean punch actual Nazis that are putting Jews into concentration camps, I'm with you. But when you call a guy with a MAGA hat on, he wears one of those red hats and he's just an asshole, he's a Nazi now? Some guy who maybe is not that educated, wants to be a contrarian, sees all these liberals that are complaining all the time, so he puts this red hat on and now he's a white supremacist and a Nazi and you want to punch him? Like, okay.
But that's what a lot of people in very high positions of power in this country, at least in the culture, actually believe. And they don't understand the implications of hollowing out words like that.
Yes.
I know this personally, right? Because I'm called alt-right. I'm called an apologist for rape culture. I've been called everything. I'm a centrist, okay? I'm a Jewish, center-left on most things person who lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and, you know, is super socially liberal on pretty much any issue you want to choose. If I'm alt-right, what words do we have left for people that actually are that?
Exactly.
What words do we have left for people who actually are part of a sort of racist blood and soil nativism that's rising in this country and around the world that should terrify people that are using that language in the sloppiest of ways?
Yes.
I really don't think they're seeing the implications of it. I also think that when you're just, you know, you're keyboard warrior and you're just tossing this stuff out, so much of it is about signaling to your tribe that you know that this thing is bad.
Yes.
And I really don't think people are understanding the implications of this. And I don't think it's a stretch to imagine something like this happening a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months from now, and someone actually getting killed.
Right, like Charlottesville. I mean, very, very similar to what happened there. This kind of, I mean, when that guy drove over those protesters, the ramping up of the dialogue on both sides, the rhetoric, the violent talk, it's so disturbing and so unnecessary, especially when it's disingenuous, like calling someone like you alt-right. Or me. I get called alt-right adjacent. That's when I hear that all the time.
Me too.
I go left on everything, basically except guns. There's a few things.
Right, and I'm like, repeal the Second Amendment.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, but I do think that there should be some restrictions for gun use, just like I think there should be restrictions for car use. I actually think there should be testing for guns, and you should have to go. Look, you have to go through you have to take driver's ed to get a car license. How come you don't have to do any? You don't have to do anything to get a gun. Like if you're not a criminal, you just get a gun. Like, you don't have to know how to take care of it and clean it and safely handle it. You don't have to know the ethics of use. You don't have to know anything.
Oh, no, it's insane. I mean, and I just spent 6 weeks in Australia where they had basically one major massacre 20 years ago. And then I forget who it was. We could look it up. But, Prime Minister, conservative, got rid of guns.
Yes.
Everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
They think we're insane and psychotic the way that we live.
Well, we're definitely weird.
The thing also, one other thing that jumped out to me about the Catholic school boy incident, it kind of signifies something broader that's happening, which is the erasure of the individual, which is just, I think, a horrifying problem in our culture. Like, what actually happened was a 1-hour incident on a random afternoon in January between a group of individuals, right? But instead in our...
Why was everyone there? There's the March for Life?
The boys were there for the March for Life. I don't know why the Hebrew Israelites were there, but it's D.C. Like, there are crazy protesters all the time, at the Lincoln Memorial and outside of the White House.
And the boys were there for a school event? Is that what it was?
They were there for the March for Life as part of their school, and they had, had free time, I think, and then were kind of converging at the Lincoln Memorial.
And they didn't have a chaperone? There's no...
No, I think there was a teacher there, and they had asked the teacher at one point, in order to drown out the heckling of the Hebrew Israelites, I hope I'm getting the name of that group right, could we do a school cheer to kind of ignore them? And they did that, and I think they did that with permission from the teachers. At one point early on, it was rumored that they were chanting "Build the Wall," but no one has surfaced any evidence of that whatsoever.
Well, that's what I heard from the Native American elder when he was talking about it in a video. He said they were chanting out, "Build that wall."
And maybe they were. I just haven't seen anything, and I've watched every video.
It's totally possible. They're also 16. Right? And they're also trying to make their friends laugh, and they're assholes, and they're just being silly and stupid.
Right. And I have to say, as someone who was a total nerd in high school, I saw the face of the main kid in that still photograph and that video. And the 14 and 15-year-old girl in me was enraged.
Yeah.
Really. I was I see the face of so many kids who said the nastiest things to me and who threw friends of mine into garbage cans, disgusting bullying.
Was it because
But the thing is, you have to get to the next step if you're a jerk. No, it was, yeah. Oh, for sure.
But if he's just standing there.
It's the hat.
And he doesn't have the
face,
hat
on. Maybe even still if it's a group.
But
my thing is your initial reaction to something is not the truth.
Right.
It's your emotional reaction. And anyone who calls themselves a journalist, your job is to figure out the facts of the case, not to make this into a kind of identitarian morality play. And the fact that so many people in so many publications did just that, and in fact, when the real facts surfaced, just sort of dug their heels in and were basically well, he's a stand-in for the white patriarchy. What? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There was an actual BuzzFeed writer that said it's the look of white patriarchy, his face. You're really going to put that on a 16-year-old? Would we do, it's just, that's nuts to me.
Well, it's cruel. It's a denial of the individual. It's very cruel. When you're 16 years old, you're basically a baby. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're incredibly susceptible to the influence of your peers. You're around a bunch of other boys. You're not around girls because you don't go to school with girls because you go to some wacky religious school. Right. This is, you want to really be a social justice warrior? You really want to save the world? How about you do something about the Catholic Church? Everybody wants to go after R. Kelly, which is great, but how about the Catholic Church? How about the #1 kid fucking organization of all time?
Yes.
That's what it is. And I was raised Catholic. I know what it is.
Did anything happen to you?
Nothing happened to me. I got lucky. But I know people. I know a bunch of people. I know a bunch of people with stories. And this is all over the world.
Oh, yeah. But
these kids come from that cult. Imagine if that was not the Catholic Church, if it was instead Scientology. We would be going, oh, these kids are a part of a cult. They went there. They're a part of this weird cult that suppresses sexuality amongst its priests and encourages the placement of these pedophile priests in new places in order to get away from whatever crime they've committed in the area where they were initially established. This is what the Catholic Church is, right? And they travel all over the place. But it also is good people. This is where nuance comes into play. It's good people. There's a bunch of people that are Catholics because they want a better relationship with God or the universe or love or whatever. They feel like it's a good moral framework for their children. They take them there. They believe in the 10 Commandments. They believe in this moral structure for society that's laid down by what they believe is God. There's great people that are involved in the Catholic Church, but it's also the #1 kid fucking organization in the world. It's those two things, right? So these kids are a part of something that's way worse than smirking at a Native American with a drum. And in my opinion, I remember when I was 16, I was a fool. I was a dumb person.
Were you a bully?
No, I was bullied.
Yeah.
I was little.
Because you were small,
I was small, and I learned martial arts when I was like 15. I mean, I'm sure I was a dick to some people just because I could get away with it. I don't really remember it. But
most 15-year-old boys and girls are in different ways.
People are dicks. You're trying it out. You know, you don't even know how to talk yet. You're basically just learning words. And this kid, with this guy beating the drum inches from his face, he handled it, I believe, way better than I would. I don't think I would have.
You might have walked away. I mean,
I don't think so.
Really?
No, I don't think so. Not when I was 16. Problem when I was 16, also I was competing. I was doing a lot of martial arts events, so maybe I would have kept it together better than I'm thinking I would have. But I definitely was a fucking idiot, and I was 16. You know, you just don't, and who knows what's going on that day? Who knows? Like if you have anxiety about the future, or your girlfriend broke up with you, or you failed the test, or what else that is like bouncing around inside your head, overwhelming your ability to form reasonable thoughts.
Totally.
16.
But let's assume, by the way, that every liberal I know, okay, everyone on the center and center left, and even the center right's reaction to it was accurate. That he was a little asshole, that he's a racist, homophobic, transphobic, hates immigrants, and every single thing. Mm-hmm. Does that deserve to be news? That a 16-year-old kid with those views smirked at a Native American elder?
Especially considering what he actually did. No.
I don't think that's news.
Not only that.
I think it's strange that we're covering it like it is. And because of the internet, the fact that my timeline on Twitter and on Facebook and on everything, this was way bigger news than day, whatever it is, 30, 31 of the government shutdown, where people are having to get on bread lines to feed their families.
Right.
I mean,
but here's the thing. Is it like, but it's what people want to talk about. I think there's this idea that there's things that are happening right now, like the government shutdown, and then there's things that are happening right now in terms of our culture shifting. And when these things that come up in opposition to what many people believe is a beneficial shift to a more progressive, more responsible culture, when these little hiccups, they get addressed, and they get addressed rapidly. And I think it's because people are aware that things are changing in this almost like unprecedented way. If you look back
unprecedented pace. I agree with that.
Yeah. Like nothing we've ever there's nothing that you could find in the historical record for human beings has ever been what we've experienced over just the past 10 plus years of social networks and social media, and the ability to spread information very quickly with a YouTube video or a tweet or whatever. Or, I mean, these
right.
The way people are exchanging information is just very different, and because of that, culture is shifting at a hyperspace speed. It's just turbocharged for sure. So I think when something comes up that we think is like, there's one, get it.
Exactly.
But it's not logical. It's like road rage. You know why you get road rage? One of the reasons? Because you're going fast. Okay, you're in a car and you're nervous. Your heightened senses, so anything that happens, it gets magnified. Like someone's, you this motherfucker in my lane.
Yes.
Fuck you, honk, honk. Because you're already jacked up to 8 because you're in a car going 60 miles an hour.
Wait, Twitter does that emotionally
Twitter's
for us.
doing that.
100%.
And social media is doing that. Life is doing that. So when something like this comes up, this rapid pace of change, which is almost impossible to keep up with, right? With the news cycle and this constant wave of change and information. So when something comes up, people are road raging on this kid.
Totally. That's why we just have to, I mean, there's lots of things to say, but one thing is just continue to insist on truth and facts.
Yes.
And not allowing people to be stand-ins for a group. You're not a stand-in for anyone. You're yourself. You answer for yourself. And I find that trend on both sides really, really scary.